Story 1. I recalled this story after reading a recent post about grade school bullies, and it triggered my memory. I'm not proud of this story, especially now that I'm a teacher. If one of my students behaved the way I did in this story, I'd probably be pulling my hair out. However, it fits this subreddit, so here it goes. In 6th grade, my class got a new science teacher, whom I will call Miss Mac. Miss Mac was a young, fresh out of college teacher who probably thought it would be wise to rule with an iron fist to earn our respect and obedience. The problem was that she went out of her way to nitpick every single thing we did, enacting much harsher punishments than we deserved. She didn't realize that she could have gotten much further with us if she had learned to pick her battles. She set ridiculous rules, like not letting anyone use the restroom more than 3 times a year during her class or giving us a Saturday detention if we forgot our homework. Even now, I don't think how she treated us was fair, but as a moody, obnoxious 12-year-old, I was quite angry and actively sought ways to get back at her. I was always an excellent student with top grades, but a common theme in all my parent-teacher meetings was my talkative nature. This often led to many trips to the front office in grade school, so I was quite familiar with all the administrators who adored me. My talkative nature didn't bother them at all. I know it must have been exhausting for my teachers, but Miss Mac took a strong dislike to me because of it. She would move me every day to sit at the back of the classroom alone if I said a single word to anyone during class, no exceptions, even if it was just to speak about the work. If we had to be in labs that day and work in groups, I'd be forced to work alone. It really stunk. One day, 10 minutes into class, I somehow hadn't been moved out of my regular seat yet. I was hopeful for the day until the person behind me dropped their pencil. It rolled under my feet, so I picked it up and handed it back. They said thank you, and I said you're welcome. That was it. Before I could even turn back to the front, Miss Mac suddenly shouted, "Darn it, why can't you just control yourself? What is the matter with you? Get to the back and don't you dare say another word for the rest of my class. I mean it." I tried to defend myself, as did the rest of the class, but she refused to hear it. So, I moved desks and sat there, seething, staring daggers into her. I decided from that moment on, I would follow exactly what she said. I'd never say another word in her class, not to her, not to my classmates, not to anyone. From the minute I entered her classroom until the minute I left, I was absolutely silent. To be honest, despite me ignoring her the few times she directly addressed me, I'm sure she probably enjoyed the first 2 weeks or so of silence. However, this all came to an end when Miss Mac had one of her monthly administrative reviews, which just so happened to coincide with my class that day. At some point during the class, Miss Mac was showing off for the administrator at the back of the classroom, randomly calling on students for a review game. She must have been in her groove or something because she clearly forgot about the ongoing situation between us and called on me to answer one of her questions. I just sat there in complete silence, staring directly into her eyes. She asked again, and I know it took everything in her not to lose her temper when I just smirked. She definitely couldn't lose her cool in front of the administrator, so I was really enjoying this moment. Watching the gears turn behind her eyes, I knew she could either keep trying to challenge me and make herself look bad or ignore my defiance and make herself look bad. She chose the latter. The administrator was not as willing to ignore my blatant disobedience. She personally knew me to be quite talkative, outgoing, and respectful to all adults. So she walked up behind me, leaned over, and asked in a whisper if everything was okay. I turned to look at her and just nodded. She whispered, "Then why aren't you answering Miss Mac?" I turned back to my teacher, looked her right in the eyes, and said at full volume, "Miss Mac told me last month that I was never allowed to speak another word in her class again." I wish I could have captured her face on camera, hers and the administrator's, to be honest. They both had such a lovely mix of shock and distaste. Unfortunately, I didn't get to hear what was said when the administrator pulled Miss Mac into the hallway, but the contorted expression on Miss Mac's beet red face upon her return to class was enough to fuel my imagination for years. The administrator took it upon herself to check up on me once a week for the rest of the year. She would stop by during that class, pop her head in, and just look at me expectantly, waiting for me to nod that I was okay. Miss Mac studiously ignored these interactions, but I know they ate away at her. And never once did she say another word to me about my talking. Story 2. To summarize, I used to work in a disability shared accommodation agency. It's a job where you support 4 to 6 people with disabilities who share the accommodation. It's shift work, 2 clients per staff member during the day, and 1 staff member on a sleepover at night. The rosters rotate on a 4-week cycle. I was employed at 75% of full-time hours, equating to 57 hours a fortnight. Additional important information: on weekdays between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m., the residents attend various day center or employment programs with other agencies, so staff are not rostered during the day. How supervisors are rostered during the day for their administration work. I was working in a house I'll call Sunup. Sunup had 4 residents and 7 workers. Each house had a house supervisor who reported to the cluster manager who managed 6 houses. Cluster managers reported to the chief executive officer. My house supervisor was a person named Karen, and I will refer to her by her title. One day, while I was working at Sunup, one resident, whom I'll call Tom, had a neurologist appointment in a few months. Tom was wheelchair-bound and nonverbal. I received a call from the clinic advising me of a canceled appointment the following day at 9:30 a.m. that was now available. I accepted the appointment and called the cluster manager. It was Karen's rostered day off, who asked me to work the following morning from 9 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. and take Tom to the appointment. I accepted, and the cluster manager said she would email Karen to let her know. The following day, I arrived at Sunup at 8:55 a.m., clocked in, and greeted Tom as the previous workers left. I started to prepare Tom for the outing. I heard Karen enter the house at 9:05 and I walked down to meet her and was met with, "What on earth are you doing here? You're not working today. Go home." I tried to explain, and she said, "Did I stutter? I said go home. I did not ask you to work, so I'm not paying you to work." Cue the malicious compliance. I walked over to the docking station, clocked out, and said, "Okay, Karen, as you requested, I'm off." "Oh, Tom has an appointment at 9:30 a.m. He is watching TV, and he's ready to go. The taxi will be here soon. The cluster manager emailed you with the details. I'll see you tomorrow for my next shift." As I left, she said, "Wait, what?" I closed the front door, walked to my car, and drove off. Karen called my mobile and said, "Why didn't you tell me about the appointment? Can you come back and take him? I will authorize the pay." I responded, "No. The cluster manager asked me to come in today at 9 a.m. I started today at 9 a.m. You dismissed me at 9:05 a.m. as per our award. Since I was requested to work and I showed up, I'm getting paid the minimum 3.5 hours. Karen insisted, "Well, as you're getting paid, you need to come back in and work it." I replied, "Well, Karen, you did dismiss me, and I clocked out. If I came back, I'd no longer be covered under the organization's insurance since I'm not clocked in. I'm entitled to 3.5 hours of work, and I will be paid for the 3.5 hours. Karen pressed on, "Just clock back in." I continued, "Well, I can't. The award also states I'm entitled to a 3-hour break between shifts. I don't know if you're aware, but I just clocked out, and after that shift, I'm tired. Even if I did, that means you'd need to pay me an additional 3.5 hours. I don't think payroll would be happy paying me for 7 hours for a 1-hour medical appointment." Karen concluded, "We will discuss this tomorrow." Then she hung up on me. I called the cluster manager and informed her of the situation. Even though she is a close friend of Karen, she acknowledged that I was in the right and ensured I'd be paid. Karen never brought it up again. P.S. Karen did end up taking Tom to his appointment. Story 3. Preface: I am a student, not a professor. I used to tutor a subject for my university called psychological statistics. It is one of the major requirements for any psychology-related major or minor. Any other science majors can take this course in place of their statistics course if their section is full. I had been tutoring students for a while at this point, and there are always a few students who come in and ask, "Can you just give me the answers for the homework/quiz/exam?" I would always give the default response of, "I can't do your homework for you, but I can help you find a way that works for you to do it," or, "I don't know what's going to be on your quiz exam. I'm a student just like you. I just tutor this." Normally, this stopped people from asking, and they would either stop coming to my hours or sit in and get the help they needed. However, one semester, a student who was intent on doing nothing came to my hours and pushed me so far that I just stopped enjoying something that I loved doing. He would come in every single one of the sessions I had and repeatedly ask, "Hey, can I get the answers for homework X?" This wouldn't have been so bad, but he would stay for the whole session, sit there on his phone, and then, before leaving, ask again, "Hey, can I get the answers for homework X now?" By the 5th week, I was hitting my boiling point, so I asked the professor, with whom I took the class, for advice on the situation. He had a smug smile on his face and said, "Give him what he's asking for." I was very confused, but before I could ask anything, he added, "He asked for answers. He didn't ask for the right ones." I smiled at that. The next session, I think you could feel the anticipation coming off of me. When he showed up and sat at my table, he pulled out his notes and said, "Hey, can I get the answers for homework X?" I replied, "Sure." I'm pretty sure he thought he had broken me. Oh, how wrong he was. The next 3 weeks for me were great. The only thing I worried about was whether my other students would hear me give him the wrong answers and use them. The best part about this was that the homework was graded a week after being handed in. If he had checked the website, he would have seen that he wasn't doing well on any of the homework assignments. But he was an arrogant person. I hope he enjoyed that 30% of his final grade. P.S. If this class had just been an elective to fill credits, I honestly wouldn't have had a problem with his whole "this isn't important, do it for me" attitude and presentation of himself. Classes that are required for a core understanding of most anything mathematics, English, or the respective language of your area in the world, sciences, etc., are subjects we should have at least enough understanding of to avoid impeding our own progress and that of others around us. I completely empathize with people who need help and tutoring because you shouldn't be left to fail if you just need a guiding hand in the right direction. However, those subjects need to be grasped by the person so they can progress. Story 4. I just called my dad about this subreddit, and he shared this story. It is his, not mine. My dad worked in a factory for 33 years. Close to his retirement, he got a new boss. Now, Dad says he should have had that guy's position, and it was actually offered to him, but he turned it down because it was a non-union position. He just stayed with his union position as a group leader. This new boss was a young college graduate with no experience working in a factory, and he took a perverse pleasure in his authority. Anyway, one day, the line Dad was working on went down, so he told the other 4 people on the line to scatter and help some other lines while he assisted maintenance in getting the line back up. While helping maintenance, here comes that young boss of his. He reprimanded Dad because it was against company policy for group leaders to help maintenance. It was also against company policy for others on the line to work on another line. In other words, you could only work on the line you were assigned to that day, and you weren't allowed to assist with repairs. So, Dad gathered the other line workers, and they headed to the break room. The young boss came in, wondering what they were doing, as it wasn't break time. Dad reminded him that the line was down, they weren't allowed to help fix it or work on another line, and that company policy stated that if you weren't actively working on the floor, you had to be outside or in the break room. So, they stayed in that break room, watched TV for 6 hours, and got paid for it. The next day, the policy was changed so that group leaders were no longer allowed to work on a line. They were each in charge of 6 lines and were only to supervise and do quality control. Additionally, anytime a line went down, the group leader could reassign people on that line to others. But it wasn't over. Fast forward a few weeks. They had 2 callouts on one 5-person line. Dad shut the whole line down and reassigned the remaining people for the day. The young boss didn't like this because the line was part of a big order processing, and it would hurt his on-time bonus. He told Dad to gather the remaining 3 workers and help them on the line. Dad reminded him that he was no longer allowed to work on the line and that company policy stated that each line could only be missing 1 person and still operate. Dad said that in his 33 years of sticking to the rules exactly, he caused no less than 200 policy changes. Story 5. My brother works in the loyalty department for a pay TV company in the United States. By loyalty, I mean he's one of the people in charge of giving last-ditch efforts to keep customers by trying to negotiate packages with them before they cancel. In case you don't know anything about the pay TV industry, Basically, channel owners make contracts with pay TV companies for streaming rights. This happens every year, so when you sign a 2-year contract, the company is essentially paying part of the cost of your package for the next 2 years, with the deficit being even higher in the second year of your contract because the prices for those channels have already gone up. This is why pay TV prices go up so drastically after a price lock contract expires. Another thing many people don't know is that it takes 3 to 4 years of service with one customer to break even on investing in promotions and such, so my brother can actually lose some hefty points on his metrics for every cancellation. There are some people, though, from whom he just refuses to take any nonsense. My brother received a phone call from a lovely customer one day, whom I'll call Karen, and it seemed she had been transferred to him. He answered, "Hello, and thank you for choosing Pay TV Company. This is brother's name. With whom do I have the pleasure of speaking?" To which Karen responded, "I just want exactly what I have now, for the same price, without you changing my account. And I want a price lock contract for 2 years. Karen was belligerent and went on a rant about how she didn't want to pay more for the same channels and how she wasn't taking no for an answer. This went on for a solid 5 minutes, during which she never even let my brother get a word in. At one point, she said the magic words for my brother, which were, "I'm not here to negotiate. You give me my channels for the exact same price for 2 years, or I will cancel my subscription." My brother patiently waited until she was done verbally berating him and paused for about 30 seconds before he spoke. Cue the malicious compliance. My brother calmly responded with, "Okay, so to which address am I sending the return boxes?" Karen responded, "What do you mean by return boxes?" "Well, you told me you don't want to negotiate, and I can't give you what you're asking for, so your service will be canceled as of today. Is your address the correct address to send the boxes to?" She went on to rant about what lousy customer service the company had, went back and forth with my brother for a little longer, and then eventually hung up without canceling her account. At least my brother's metrics weren't affected. Also, I want to point out that I used to work for this same company as an account specialist dealing with soft disconnects, people who are disconnected due to not paying their bills. And you should know that a lot of the calls my brother gets have likely gotten close to being in soft disconnect up to 3 or 4 times within a 6-month period. There are people out there who genuinely believe they are entitled to some of the most expensive packages available for absurdly low rates. Think like 300 plus channels with DVR capability for $50 or less. You can dislike the company, but don't fault my brother for having to filter some of these people out and decide they are better off canceling. I quit the job myself partially because I was terrible at standing up for a business I would personally never use to begin with.